Welcome back to the Working Audio Tools podcast, where we discuss everything to do with mixing, mastering, and document our journeys towards becoming full-time mix engineers with myself, Ed Thorne, here in London, and my fellow co-host Paul Third up there in the darkest depths of Scotland. This episode is sponsored by Baby Audio, the maker of creative instruments and effects for music production. Baby Audio plugins are about solving problems and adding character to your mix. From the flexible, soulful, and color-driven BA1 synth to the Compact Delay Kit module for quick and versatile delay effects. Now, I've left a link in the description to one of my old videos, bear with, of this delay plugin, so check it out and get 15% off any order with our special Working Audio Tools VIP code WAT15. Go to babyaudio.io to learn more. Get 15% off with the WAT15 code at checkout. So this week, we are taking a little bit of a turn. Upon actually some requests from people in the comments, we've done our £1,000 budget, the 5K budget videos, and the unlimited ideal goal dream studio setups for recording and mixing. But this week, we wanted to go into the details of the nitty-gritty kind of things that go behind all the exotic and the headline stuff like speakers and converters and microphones and stuff. All the little things that can actually really make quite a big difference from a workflow point of view, from a sonic point of view, and also from a quality of life point of view as well. Paul, what are we discussing in this episode?
We are going to be discussing all of the sexy things in audio. The sexy things, like say, like if you bring like a client in and you're just like, have a look at that. How sexy does that look? No, we're not really.
The arousing stuff that's going to lure the client and really sell the contract.
Proper arousing.
Great.
Okay, so I suppose the most arousing thing that, I could think of, just like straight off the bat, would be power conditioning. I think that is one of the most sexiest things in audio. Now, the reason I'm talking about power conditioning is because now this is going to be funny because me and Ed say it differently. Of course we do, Scottish and English. I call it Furman because it's Furman. And what do you call it, Ed? Furman, almost like with an E in it. So yes, I bought a Furman. It's a 10 output power conditioner.
You got the same one, right? The M10 LXE.
That's it. So I've got that from Anderton's today. I got it for 125 quid, which I think is decent. And the reason that I've got that is not for like the reasons that many people would think. I can't test it. So many people say that if you have a power conditioner, then there are various factors that can make your audio signals a little bit more cleaner in regards to like noise and crosstalk and blah, 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 blah. Because I think I was reading today, you can even get crosstalk from the noise of like each socket, blah, blah, blah. Now, obviously, we're in the UK, so we are quite fortunate because we all run on pretty much clean, stable 230 volt power straight from the socket. However, I don't have many sockets in here, so I'm running like nearly everything at this desk off of two extensions, which isn't really the best. They're surge protected, but it's a faff and it's a bit of a nightmare at the back where I just like the idea of having the Furman. So the only annoying thing is, and Ed, I take it when you bought yours, you had to buy separate cables because the Furman is IEC to IEC. Like you can't plug a socket and like a plug top.
Yeah, so you've got to buy the coupling cables, but that's quite good because it saves a lot of space.
Yeah, so I've got basically what I've got to do is take the cables into work, snip off the plug tops, and then put on IEC cables because I've got loads in the work.
Just buy them, you tight ass.
No, I've got. What's the point in wasting cables?
They're like £6 for a 2 meter cable.
Yeah, but I've got but there's 10, so it'd be 60 quid. Why would I pay 60 quid when I could do it myself?
Because you're going to pay £3 for the end anyway.
No,
and then have to spend an hour doing it yourself, and you're going to get it wrong first time.
Remember,
it's like resoldering a cable.
He's not listening. Right?
Did that once, took me an hour. I'd just rather spend 25 quid on a new cable.
There's no soldering needed, okay? It's very simple. I've got the IEC, I've got loads of them. Remember, I work in the electrical department in the college and everybody's off for summer. Hey!
Oh, yeah.
Quality.
Quality.
Yeah. Right. And my boss doesn't give a shit about stuff like this, so nobody's
you're getting the 5-finger discount on them.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's generally just as simple as like cutting the end off. Then you're going to have your live, your neutral, and your earth. And again, you just connect them into the correct bits of the IEC, job done, and that's it. I'll get my dad probably to look over them when I've done them all. just to make sure. But it's very, very straightforward, very simple.
For any non-British people, Paul did say neutral in his accent.
Now, what did you think I said?
Neutral.
Neutral. Yeah, neutral.
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 Yep.
Neutral.
Moving on. Power conditioners are useful. And actually, if you really want to go to extreme, I have some interesting experience with power conditioners. I've been meaning to get the Ross Andrews purifiers. But there's a guy I know, Damon Sawyer, shout out to Damon, if you're listening, who's got a studio, and he has some mega power conditioners. Like, we're talking £5,000 for an IEC cable. And what these are doing is lowering any kind of electrical hum and interference that will go through your electrical equipment that can elevate the noise floor of your gear, especially if you're using analog gear. And it can affect converters as well. And actually, the difference these things make is genuinely audible. Now, MSM may disagree because we've had a day test and all this stuff. He wasn't a fan. But I swear you can hear a difference, but I'm not going to spend $5,000 on a power conditioner.
Much it is. Jesus Christ.
As if. Anyway, there's another one that I've been recommended that's about £85, which at some point I might invest in just to get over your typical IEC, normal, standard, dirty, noisy IEC cables. So power, sexy beast for a studio.
And as well,
what's next on the list?
Know what? You made a great point, because another reason that I was thinking about this as well is because I've probably never heard it, but Ed has. I've got a neighbour at the very back of the studio, and he's got this big, massive mast.
Yeah.
And we have interference from his mast. Like, it's almost like it sounds like a speaker is like outside, and you could hear outside and stuff, and sometimes it gets into the recordings. It's not happened in a long time. I think I've got this, I said to Ed, I've got this idea that he hears me, and probably he's like, I don't know if he's like fucking radioing trucks or whatever, but he's doing his little hobby, and all he hears is some Scottish guy going, fuck's sake, like, shut it off, why is this in this audio signal? It's the Scottish guy rambling. He's like, right, hun, I think I better stop, because that nutter in this new studio is probably going to chop our door. He's a lunatic.
Every Monday night.
Yeah, so but apparently there is filtering or whatever in the power conditioners, like the Furman. So you are meant to have less RF interference. These are the things that many people have said to me over the years, like, it's so important, it's better, you need to buy a power conditioner, and if you've got cheap gear, you're really going to need it, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, where are you from? I'm from America. I was like, well, no wonder. It's like, because American voltages can go fucking like per region, like in terms of like the power distribution and stuff. I mean, I'm pretty sure there isn't even a thing as an earth in some regions in America. That's fucking mental. Like
no, it's literally positive, negative for the alternating current.
Like in the UK, like everything is like proper
you
legislation.
Are the ground in America.
Yeah, totally, yeah.
Which is
but yeah,
great.
Power, right?
For all involved.
Yeah, power, right? We're done, right? That's the reason why Ed's got, how many have you got there too? And yours?
I've got two of the Furmans. What I would say about power, though, is if you are considering a studio complex, do not get one anywhere near a railway line.
Yes, very good.
If you've ever been in a rehearsal studio, of which there are many in London, that I have frequented over the time, that are in archways below railway tracks. The power's a nightmare. The noise, the buzzing in the system, hideous. Avoid being anywhere near railway tracks. Next on my list is cables. Now, this is a controversial one. This is like a gear space Reddit mecca for slagging each other off about, Hoser cabling versus Megami cabling. Now, I have some interesting experience in this as well with Damon. If anyone's interested in reaching out to this guy, he's got all sorts of fascinating things that will help improve your studio in terms of interference, cabling for sonics and stuff. And yeah, he's fascinating. And he brought a set of £1,200 silver cables to my studio to try with the PSIs. And there was a difference. There was an audible difference. There's an audible cohesion and depth and clarity that the PSIs deliver in abundance already, but amplified even more. It's incredible. Again, for £1,200, it's a no from me, but the potential is there. Now, you are getting into audiophile world, and obviously £1,200 is ridiculous, given you could, buy Paul's studio for £1,200.
30 grand, you
So
bugger.
what-
That's what I've priced this. Fucking 30 grand. That's how much this is.
Fucking
Get it up, yeah.
amateur effort.
Yeah, it is actually. In terms of like other studios, especially London studios, Jesus. A couple of $100,000.
Anyway,
mental.
It's not a willy waving competition, this podcast, Mr. Third. So,
Because I would win.
So cables can make a difference, but I would really like to know your experience listening. If you're on YouTube, leave a comment, or if you're on Apple or Spotify, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts and give us some comments. So when I bought on my 500 series, I went for the cheap Hoser cabling, and then I have heard some Megami cabling, and there's a slight something. I don't know if it's much of a difference, but if you're thinking about I've got 16 channels of I/O, that will add up. So maybe there's something in that. But then, as Paul reminded me this week as well, he was like, "Yeah, you just get a better clocking system, and you'll eliminate all that rubbish anyway." So.
Yeah, if you're worried about jitter, just get a good master. Like again, the topping. Like I've actually forgot I could set that as a master clock. So when I've got the Evo 16 and the two SB8s, I've got the topping as a master clock, which helps. But see, when it comes to cabling,
Swinging his dick again.
Yep, it has to happen. But I don't get a chance to do it that often. Normally,
You're married, aren't you?
Normally, I'm the cheapo, and Ed's like the super expensive Supremo in the analog world. But see, when it comes to cabling, I just don't give a shit. And like I had a custom cable made once, and it cost me 35 quid, and people will be like, that's not a Megami, but it was expensive to me. But it was 35 quid, and I got the Nutric connectors, and it was blah, blah, blah. I can't remember even where I got it from. And I did a test, and I checked the noise floor, and the Hoser cables that I had the noise floor was the same. There was no fucking audible difference.
The thing about cabling is you've either got your cheap stuff. The difference between the cheap stuff and the really high-end stuff is the amount of, is it carbon in the metal? The amount of impurities, that's probably, let's go for the vaguer scientific term so I don't get that wrong. The amount of impurities, apparently the purer the metal, the better it is for audio. But with regards to the endings, whether it's like a Studio Spares molded one, woefully bad, but cheap. If you're just sticking it in once in the back of a patch bay or set in the back of your 500 series, that's fine. I always went for Neutrik cables live because I was patching them in and out all the time, every day. So I needed the durability. So if you are just going to set up your studio once, as most of us do, but I promise you, it will never be once. There will always be some kind of reworking at some point. You can get away with the cheaper connectors. It's more the cable quality. But really, as Paul's saying, the difference between the Hoser stuff, in my experience, the Sommer cabling, whatever, and then the Megami, and then the silver stuff, it's just like anything in the studio world. It's just exponential returns for such
infinitesimal
little
results.
Return. When really, like, at the end of the day, if your song's shit, none of this matters. And if you're not hearing phase shifting because your monitoring isn't right, that's going to be a far bigger issue than any of this.
Yep, and as well, I'd always say, right, if you can't mix a record professionally using like Hoser cheap fucking cables, then I don't really think you should be calling yourself a fucking mixing engineer, right? If you genuinely believe that you need the most expensive cables all the way throughout your studio to mix professionally, which I hear a lot, bullshit, right? But we'll leave that for the gear sluts. And it's gear spice, yes, fucking gear sluts. It's never changed. Change the name all you want. You'll never change the fucking attitude.
I thought it was Gear Days. But anyway,
yes, quality. That's the best one you've had all weekend. Gear Days, properly.
But I think as we rounded off last week, a few people commented about this to me in private, and I think we had a comment on the video. If you get enjoyment out of that, and you can hear the difference, and you enjoy that, and you've got the budget, go for it.
Yeah, go nuts. It's your life. Live your best life.
DistroKid sponsor the Working Audio Tools podcast, and you can get 30% off your first year's subscription using the VIP link in the YouTube video description and podcast show notes. DistroKid makes distribution of your music easy with unlimited uploads, and you get to keep 100% of your royalties and earnings. Join over 1 million artists who rely on DistroKid to get their music into Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube Music, TikTok, Tidal, Instagram, and all other streaming platforms now and in the future. The new DistroKid app is available on iOS. Go and download it from the App Store now. From here, you can upload new releases. You can see your DistroKid earnings and withdraw these earnings. You can view and share your hyperfollow links. You can check your streaming statistics from Spotify and Apple, and even add and edit lyrics and song titles. So keep track of your releases on the move with the new DistroKid app, available on iOS. Download it from the App Store now. Now, one thing that is really important that I certainly learned on my speaker journey that I documented on my channel when I found the PSIs and went through loads of different speakers, I had quite an interesting phenomena where I had these isolation pads that came with the ZAOR desk that I've got. There's a video about that on my channel as well, because a lot of people ask about this desk because it does look good. However, functionally, as I realised, it's not quite perfect. For the following reason, on these pads, which have the ISOACOUSTIC mini pucks inside them, and then it's a block of wood and then a bit of foam on top. And the speakers sit on those, and they can handle most size speakers. Because I was having the speakers horizontally, just because of the height of the desk, which I never realised, but actually is a problem when you're trying to get the tweeters at ear level. The area between the tweeters and the mid drives at ear level. I have to have my PSIs horizontally, which does slightly compromise them because they're all designed to be upright. Now, when I was trying, I wanted to A/B speakers. I'd have one set at the bottom and then put like a piece of foam on top and then have the other set on top. And every time the set on top sounded better. And I couldn't figure out why. And then someone said, well, yeah, it's because you're getting a 150 hertz desk reflection on the bottom one that's muddying up the low mids. And weirdly, in this studio, with the Amphions on top of the PSIs, there seems to be a space where the speakers sound better, but they've got to be really high and pointing down at me, as the Amphions are at the moment. But one thing that really helped was eliminating as much as I could the desk resonances. Now, boring fact, but this desk is chipboard, and I was disappointed because it's got a really nice veneer on, and I was naive and thought that this would be a nice thick veneer piece of wood, solid timber. And then when I got it, I thought, actually, there's probably a reason that it's not for price. Chipboard's cheap, but also chipboard doesn't resonate anywhere near as much as a block of timber would. So from a vibration point of view, it's actually quite functional. But there's still obviously vibrations going into the speakers, and I can feel on the desk, if I have the speaker on, I can feel the speakers, especially in the low end, obviously vibrating the desk. So acoustic isolation pucks or stands are absolutely imperative for any speakers if you've got them on a desk. Ideally, have them off a desk and on stands at the back. I don't have the space for that in my studio, otherwise I'd have done that ages ago. But I've got the ISOACOUSTIC frames. They're great. You can physically feel how much vibration they're taking out of the linkage between the speaker and the desk. And also the ISOACOUSTIC pucks are really good. You've also got the DMSDs that are stupid money. I think they're £500 for 4. Apparently they're even better. But as long as you have some speaker isolation, Paul, you've got experience of this recently, haven't you?
Yeah, I've got the ISO pucks. So I've swapped things about in the studio. So I've now got the small we call them the LA speakers, the NDM PR1s, small, like 3.5 inch.
The Galaxy ones,
the Galaxy ones,
travelled around LA.
Yeah, so I'm using them for that. But the edifiers, I don't know. I'm still in my head whether to take them off because you know what I'm like. I need to tweak all the time. But I really like the sound of the speakers, so I might just leave them because if it's good, it's good. But the edifiers have these tiny little like feet at the bottom, and I don't know if that's just aesthetic, but I don't know if it's doing some form of isolation. I imagine it would, but it wouldn't be doing as good as the ISO acoustics. But yeah, there is definitely a difference. So
now, in theory, you could put the rubber feet on top of the ISOACOUSTIC pucks. However, there is a video that explains how something like those rubber feet, if the speaker's moving, the rubber feet might be amplifying and counteracting the frequency at which the speakers are vibrating. The whole speaker cabinet is going to vibrate back and forward with the driver. It's all connected. However much you isolate them, there is some movement on an infinitesimal level. So MSM will tell you there's probably some element of cancelling or phase shifting. Maybe. We're talking like mega nerd. Let's just move on because that's just getting way too nerdy. So I've covered my desk, which looks great. It has all the housing for the 500 series. but sonically was causing a problem. And 150 hertz is apparently the magic frequency. PMC speakers have a mode to dial that out by, I think, 3 dB, 4 dB to help counteract that. And it really does help the low mids clear up. It's remarkable. Paul, what did you go for with functionality regarding a desk?
Right, so I obviously didn't pay as much as Ed did. I went for Thomann, I want to say 300. It was a desk from Thomann. Loads of people have asked me about it because everybody likes the look of it. But
is that the Millennium SD180?
That is the one. That one there's a 300.
It's 279.
There you go. It's went down in price a little, but it houses everything that I personally need in the studio. So I knew I was only going to have 2 500 series lunch boxes, and then again, obviously that houses that, and then I've got, because what is that? 1, 2, 3. Was it 3U? Yes.
I can see your problem now. So I'm looking at this desk online. It looks good, but for those who, I mean, no one would be aware of this desk except Type Paul, but it's got 500 or analog series. What am I about? It's got 19U racks at the back, but they're right at the back. I can see why if you loaded those, there'd be a weight.
Starts at the top.
There'd be a balancing issue.
Yeah, which I've got just now. So
Paul has a very expensive paperweight to counteract.
Yeah, I'm not going to say what it is.
No, don't say what it is.
When I had the edifiers and the Calais IN5s like on that back perch, I was like, wow, my wife was like having a panic attack. She was, because I moved it out because I was like tweaking stuff, and I was like, no, I'll move it out. I think I can get a better measurement. And she was like, oh, Paul, that's moving. They're so expensive. Paul. So I was like, it's fine. You know what? Like, guys are like, yeah, fuck it. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, it'll be fine. Yeah. Even though like if you touched it, you're like genuinely felt it moving. But again, that's the things that you need to like consider, that it's a £300 fucking desk, right? It's obviously made from like lighter wood than what Ed's is. It's smaller, and you know it's not really made to take the fucking amount of weight that I had on it. Even though you would imagine the edifiers and a pair of IN5s wouldn't be that much, but when you put the 500 series obviously at the very back, and then you've got the Evo 16, the SP8, all of that stuff genuinely can weigh on a desk. So you do kind of get what you pay for. You get again a difference in size, but I bought what I needed. So this desk is entirely everything that I needed. It's even got a drawer bit at the bottom that I don't know, I'm thinking about getting like a keyboard or something in there just so I can do quick synthy bits if I'm producing or whatever. But
yeah, mine's got a nice keyboard shelf.
So
the one thing that screwed me over about my desk that I did not see in the photos or didn't notice in the design plans that I looked at was that there's a support strut going from one side to the other at the back, and that basically means that I can't put my subwoofer against the back wall. Now everyone's like, oh, you got to have your sub on the wall. I know, but I physically can't do it. So another reason this room and studio is compromised. Right, now this is one particularly close to my heart, this next one, Paul, and that is microphone stands.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have extensive experience with microphone stands doing live sound, and the only ones to get are K&M. Gravity in the UK, pretty good as well. They do some good stuff, except why do they have the luminous fluorescent green bands on? Just looks shit on corporate events. They get taken off. But mic stands, if you've got, like, what have I got now? I've got my Warm Audio WA-CX12 on my stand. It's quite a chunky microphone. If you've got a cheap stand, that thing's falling over or sliding down mid-performance. You don't want that. It's a real buzz killer, and it's a microphone killer. And if you've got big booms and overhead, condenser mics coming on, you might not have a problem with pencil mics. Again, if they're static and not moving, but usually recording studios are pretty fluid environments. Cables get pulled, things get moved around. Stuff does inevitably fall over, but a K&M stand is weighty. It's German built. It is built for life. You'll never need to buy another one. They don't break. They're indestructible. If you buy cheap, you buy twice. If you buy K&M, you'll buy once.
Yeah, very true. Because I've got cheap stands in my studio, and trust me, over the years I have broke a ton, because the thing that always seems to break the cheap ones is because they're all plastic, and it's when you turn them. So obviously when you're tightening them, you tighten them too much, or again they get too rigid or firm, and then you try and make an adjustment, they could just snap. And I've had I would say at least 6 or 7 in the past 15 years break on me.
Yep.
So they're cheap, but
avoid the studio spares ones. Honestly, I've owned mic stands since uni, since I had my first recording set up. They all got used on my live gigs before I even got into sound. I had them when I did sound. I've never broken a K&M stand.
Mm-hmm.
Never broken anything. The only thing about all mic stands that annoy me is, why do we still have the biggie small adapters?
Yeah.
I know where it comes from. Some of the older microphones have the bigger adapter thread, but we don't use them anymore.
I know.
We all use the same adapter thread. Why does this concept not fuck off? Moving on. Patch bays. Now, I have no experience with analog patch bays other than a few studios I've used them in. I understand the idea of balancing them, or whatever you have to do. But Flock audio patch all the way. There is a theory that they create noise. In my experience, not true. And most people I know who've used them, that's not true. But in terms of the flexibility of patching analog gear anywhere, it's literally like dragging and dropping plugins. It's so time saving. And if I have a different session up, I've got a podcast session, a vocal session, a mixing session, I just pull it up on Recall as if I'm pulling up a preset of a plugin, and there's all my routing with the analog gear. It's absolutely genius if you haven't heard of the Flock audio patch bay.
Yeah, because I've got a little bit of experience. When I was at college, they had 2 Avid consoles, and they had the patch bays in there, and they used to teach us all about just like that goes into there, that goes into there. And to be honest with you, it's generally patch bays are the most easiest of things. It's just when you have, obviously, you're dealing with consoles, and you could be dealing with 25, 30, 40 channels, and if you've got the money to spend to get all of them like filled, that's a lot of IO, and it could genuinely be easy, especially because they did this in college, and I was like, why did you do this? But they had the strips like still there, but they didn't tell us, and they made it out that somebody had been a bit of a silly bugger and taken out all of the strips in the patch bay, so you didn't know what was what. So they were like, right, okay, boys, right, you're going to have to figure out where everything is. So we had to get like a thing and like write down that goes to that, that's for that, that's for that. And see, just having till it was so laborious. But you could imagine that if you didn't take the time to do it properly, oh my days, imagine it was like, oh, where's the API? And they're like, oh, it's output in a 13 and somebody's fucked up and stuck it in an output or whatever, and just like, oh my god, the two of them aren't matching. Like, I can imagine it just being an absolute mess. So doing it.
I mean, the good thing with the analog patch bays is nothing can go wrong because it's hardwired.
Yeah, true.
The Flock is digitally controlled, and digital can go wrong, obviously. And if, for example, Flock folded the company and there was no further support, there would be potentially an issue. As computer iOS got more updated, and the software wasn't kept up to date. That's a risk I'm willing to take at the moment for the flexibility. It is obviously rather expensive for what it is. I'm pretty sure like a 32 channel analog patch bay is going to cost you a few hundreds of pounds plus the cabling. Whereas the Flock, actually it's the cabling that really adds up, doesn't it?
Yeah, big time, yeah.
With the Flock, you've not got any cabling other than your IO DB25s. You've not got all the individual patch cables. But they I think the Flock patch, which I've got, which is 32 IO, it's about £3,000.
And that's definitely something to consider, is like, it's all fine and well, say when you get your first lunchbox and then you get your second one, and you're like, oh yeah, especially if you buy 2 of them at the same time, and you're like, oh, I can't wait to fill them, and you spend all that money on like getting them filled, and you get your modules. You've not thought about the cabling, and like, oh my god, the amount of times that I have to sit there and go, oh yeah, okay, I've got that coming in, and I'm like, oh, I need to buy 2 more cables, and my wife's always like, why don't you just buy all the cables for all of it, so when you get it filled, you've got the cable there just to go. But cables frustrate me, because the amount of times I've bought cables and I'm like, all these different connections, I've got seeing this like at the bottom of that fucking not wardrobe, what's it called? Like a unit thing. There's like a wee cabinet at the bottom, and it's just like where all the cables go to die. Like all the times I've bought cables and I've been like, oh yeah, I need a 3.5 to TS. I need a TRS to that. I need an RCA to that. I've got subwoofer cables in there. I've got all the connections, optical. I've got 2 coax cables. I've got like SPDIF cables. I've got all these things because I've tried lots of different connections. And it's amazing how much that can build up, because cables still aren't cheap when you add it up. And
no, they're really not.
yeah.
Nowadays.
And when you think about it,
I guarantee at some point you will use every cable you've got.
100%.
Something will come up where you need that exact cable.
But just remember, right, that like depending on like the 500 series that you've got, like it infuriates me that the way that my Midas one works, because it's XLR. So the way it kind of works is that it's like everything's XLR. But normally in the studio, I was used to using TRS to TRS. So I had to buy all new cables, and then I was buying TRS to, because at the time I was using the Apollo X6 and the line outs were only TRS. So I had to then get TRS to XLR. But obviously now it's the same way in the Evo, because all line outputs are TRS.
Yeah.
So yeah, you've got to get TRS to XLR, and it's like, I could just build up, and it's something you don't think about. And if you think about that, you've got in and out. So you've got 2 cables per 500 series. So I've got 6, there's 12, there's 24 cables, genuinely just to, connect your 2 500 series lunchbox.
And it adds up, and every time you buy a cable, you're spending £5 or £6 in postage.
Yep.
It does add up. Moving on to something, well, okay, let's do the really unsexy one, and then we'll go to a bit more of a sexy studio vibe.
Oh, yeah.
The unsexy one is chairs.
Yes, nothing really.
Now,
no, chairs could be sexy. It depends who's sitting in them. You know what I mean? That's what my wife says.
Moving swiftly on to Dawkins. No. Yeah, chair's an interesting one. If anyone watching the video on YouTube, I've got an IKEA thing. It was like, I don't know, 115 quid or something. Someone had a go at me about the height of it. Oh, you're going to get reflections off the back of it into your ears. I was like, that's maybe a valid point. But what is it? The Herman Miller.
That's it. The Herman one,
Get a Herman Miller chair. Now, I've had one of these. Now, brand new, these are like £700, £800. I feel like it's extortionate.
Yeah, totally.
The argument is you spend hours and hours a day in it.
Very
Don't
true.
skimp on it. It is true. And they're a lower back, so they're not going to get in the way. But I had one. I bought it secondhand, and it was so fucking heavy. Just moving it around was genuinely laborious. Whereas this one's quite light. And I put skater wheels on just to get a little bit of extra height. But I roll around quite smoothly. It's quite nice. Any thoughts on chairs, or should we just end the podcast now and move on to season 7?
Obviously, in Paul Third fashion, I don't have an expensive chair. I didn't even buy this. I got this from my father-in-law. It's generally just like it's a computer chair.
There's a lot of Herman Millers on eBay secondhand for about £300 to £400.
Are they comfy though? That's the most important thing. Are they comfy?
Yeah, they are. I mean, the problem is they're so tweakable. There's so many things you can change on them. I couldn't quite get the settings I wanted. I was either leaning too far back or sliding off it. Anyway, chairs. Guys, we weren't lying when we said this was a sexy episode. If we miss anything out, please leave your thoughts and comments on things we've overlooked, because there's obviously going to be something. I did consider talking about lights. No, boring. We did consider talking about computers. We kind of take that as a given. One thing we wanted to mention was wireless keyboards and trackpads. Mm-hmm. Very sensible.
I've got wireless
move them around
in all my studio. But I do think very quickly, we should just mention computers very quickly. Fuck nearly, Jesus Christ. I've got a Windows setup, but I've also got a MacBook Pro that I use for the Atmos room and all of my mobile stuff. Ed's got a Mac setup. I would say having both and having the MacBook Pro, if I had the money, I would change all this to Apple, which is weird because I've been a Windows man for so long.
Ooh, but that's a big statement. I know,
but see the power that, honestly, it baffles me how a MacBook Pro can have that much power, and it's just an M1. And it's crazy. I was like,
oh, they're so efficient.
It's crazy, man. Like
on silicon.
I could run a full Atmos session, like no problem. I'd probably be able to do it on this, but I would say that the M1 chip is probably better than the i9 that's in this computer. But I mean, the computer runs away fine, but I could get more session-wise, slightly more out of the MacBook. And again, if I got an even bigger setup, you pay for it. You pay for it deep. But I do think it is important. I think it's important to have a lot of storage. That's something that's very important. I've got multiple SSDs.
Oh, yeah, hard drives.
Yeah.
Good shout.
Yeah, we've got Google. We've got
piling on the sex appeal.
Yeah, baby. And
I'm getting moist.
Moist. And what makes it even more moist is when you go to the digital realm and you start going Google Drives and shit. Yeah, baby. Me and Ed have got the Google Drive for this podcast. I've got a Google Drive for two separate emails. I've got 2 terabyte SSDs. I've got like a 500 gig USB. I've got lots of different storage options because it's very important. Because especially when we were in LA, Warren had a room at the back of the studio where the drum kit was, and it was just all of these orange SSDs.
Oh, they were up to something like 99.
Yeah, all the phrase stuff. It was mental. I was like, "There's all the phrase multi-tracks there." I was like, "Wow."
Yeah.
So important, man. But then,
hard drives.
is everybody going digital now? But then my concern with the digital thing is if you get hacked or like you lose access, that would make, I don't know. I like having physical things, but I suppose with physical things, they can get lost, they can get broken. But if you store them correctly, then theoretically it should be fine.
I do both. So I'll have my live sessions on my computer. So if the computer dies mid-session, I am fucked at this stage. But then as soon as I've finished the session and the client signed off, the whole session is going onto a hard drive, and the final mixes and masters are going on to A, the hard drive, B, they stay on my computer hard drive, and C, they go up into Google Cloud.
Yeah.
So there's 3 different areas, and obviously I've sent it to the client.
Yeah,
so
backing up is so important because even on my MacBook Pro, I've got the exact same setup. I'm at a point where if this computer was to go down today, all the sessions are on an SSD. I've got it on the hard drive, but backed up to an SSD. So if a session was needing done and the computer packed up, I could generally just take that SSD, plug it into the MacBook Pro. I've got basically an identical kind of mirrored Studio One setup, and I can just mix and connect everything to this setup, and it'd be good to go. So that is something that's very important. Make sure you've got the processing power to handle heavy sessions. And make sure you've got storage. Storage isn't like sexy, but you would be shitting yourself if you had a label mix and they came back to you. Imagine it was a remaster, and they came back to you and was like, "Yeah, so we're going to do a remaster of this song, and we need the multi-tracks." And you're like, "Yeah, I don't have them." What do you mean you don't have them? Like, we're a way to do a imagine you did it 15 years ago. They're like, "Yeah, we're a way to do a remaster," and you're like, "I don't have it." You're the only man that has the fucking multi-tracks. That could be a career ender straight away for you.
Yeah,
you know
that's going to be a difficult one. Speaking of computers, I the amount of posts I see in Facebook forums of what's the cheapest computer I can get for music production.
Yeah, I know.
As always, facepalm, fucking get a grip. I've always suggested, especially with Macs, because you've got one chance to get it right with your model, because now that you can't upgrade Macs, which is
the worst thing about Macs.
Horrible of Apple, but I understand why they do it. My advice is always get as much RAM as you can.
Yeah, big time.
Now, with the M1 stuff compared to Intel, as you said earlier, the M1 silicon chips at 16 gigabytes of RAM is apparently the equivalent of an older Mac at 24 gigabyte RAM.
Okay, yeah, I've read that.
Apparently, they are almost 50% more efficient. And they are frighteningly quick, but just, in my opinion, future-proof yourself. Get the best spec you can buy.
Agreed.
And then it'll last you 10 years. I've got a MacBook Pro laptop it's 2015. It's nearly 10 years old, and it's still rocking. I did live recordings with it when I had the sound business, and I mean, I had to have a cooling tray because there was a cooling issue on that Mac, but that's a whole other issue. Regards to hard drives, my experience is 2 different types of hard drives primarily. One is the Western Digital G drive, which looks sexy. They're a good price. And I've had 2 of them fail. And I've had 2 of them corrupt files. And I've got an originals project where some of the audio files, not many of them, but like 1 or 2 in a session, where the files have been corrupted to some kind of 8-bit format. So one of them is a hi-hat part that's going and it's fucked. So fuck G drive and your shit drives. Ever since realizing it was those that were the problem, I've used SanDisk Extreme portable ones. They're really small with a little orange, almost keyring hole on them. USB-C, I think they're about 160 quid. I'll try and put links to this stuff if I remember in the description. They will be affiliate links if you would like to support the channel. But those great. I've got 4 of them. Never had a problem. They've never failed. They do get concerningly warm, but I've never had a problem with them. So SanDisk Extreme Portable Hard Drives is my personal recommendation. Wow, we are really moistening up this episode with the talk about hard drives, aren't we? But talking of things getting hot, baby, this is a brilliant segue. Heaters and air conditioning. Yeah. Now, Paul doesn't need air conditioning. They have 5 days of summer a year. They have more days of sunshine and they score goals in tournaments. Sensitive spot. I'm feeling quite hungry, actually, at the moment.
Oh, for fuck's sake. Jesus.
So Paul needs heaters. I mean, he can bore you with the details about radiators, whatever. But I want to talk about air conditioning because I was in a studio recently. It was warm in London. And the guy had an extractor fan, which is fine for airflow. But we got quite hot in there. And it was getting uncomfortable. And the problem with studios getting hot is obviously with the analog gear. Like if I turn on my analog gear, they're like radiators. I can get an extra 5 degrees of temperature in the room just from running audio through this stuff. And that's probably quite minimal compared to if you have a console. I mean, if you've got consoles, you know this already. I don't need to be explaining this to you, but air conditioning, it's useful for clients. You know, in my room, if there's 2 of us in here working, gets a bit stuffy, put the AC on in between takes or something. It's useful to have good quality air conditioning.
And definitely radiators, like I'm not joking you. But again, he fucking needs English as well. Jesus Christ, it's cold for us all. But it is super cold for us in the winter in Scotland. So I've got again, for those of you who don't know the British weather, to put this in perspective, on the weather that I saw on the news this week, in England we're getting highs of 28. In the north of Scotland, it was getting highs of 5. No, honestly, I got burnt over the weekend. We had
degrees Celsius. We had
24.
So Fahrenheit.
We had 24 in Dundee, and I got burnt, and I was raging. I only fucking sat in it for like 20 minutes. Fucking had to get the after sun and shit. I was fucking raging.
And that cost money, and I know how much that would have been.
But yeah, I paid. Ed will be surprised, but this is important because, especially in Scotland. But I paid 70 quid for my heater, and I got a good one. Because when it is freezing, the last thing you want is to be working and be like, oh, you just get a fucking coat on. But it's not good when you've got clients coming in. I don't want clients to come in and be like, oh my God, this is freezing, because it's so unprofessional. So I've got a heater that is on a swivel. And obviously it is, in true Paul Third fashion, it has a remote, because we all know I love fucking remotes. I went cheap first and got these small heaters. But the problem is with small heaters are super noisy. So as soon as you switch them on, all you hear is, and you're like, okay, I really don't want to be listening to audio with that on. So I bought that, and it's very, the noise is pretty minimal to the point where you hardly hear it being on. It's very, but again, when it comes to that stuff, you get what you pay for. If you buy cheap on Amazon, expect for there to be limitations.
Just a final note on extractors. It's often that is the point of weakness with soundproofing in studios. If you go cheap, it's very easy just to put a vent on, and effectively you've just got an open window to the outside. So those are things worth considering if anyone's building a studio.
Can't believe I didn't even think about this, because I'm looking at it right now. It's a monitor. It's a screen. That's obviously something you've got to think about. Now, obviously, in Paul Third fashion, I didn't pay for the monitor screen. I got it free from our good friend Andrish. Andrish Kiss. He gave me his Acer one. And yes, it's been doing the job.
Gentleman.
See, the thing about a computer screen is important, because see, when you're in the DAW, how much you're going to get out that screen is genuinely quite important in regards to like how much you can fit in the screen in the DAW. The wider the screen you have, and dependent on the DAW you have, you can actually make your life a lot easier. If the smaller screen and a smaller resolution, things get kind of crammed. But the wider you go, you can get kind of, I wouldn't say more features in the DAW, but the bigger the screen, again, you get more.
Oh, yeah.
So you can actually see more waveforms, and you know what I mean? You can just, bigger resolution, obviously you can kind of fit more onto the screen. I've actually been considering buying another monitor, because I quite like having when I've been in studios and they've got big monitors. So I'm thinking about maybe going online, getting a second-hand one that's bigger than that, But then it does have to be HD, because there's nothing worse when you've got a shitty monitor and you're mixing, or again, you're doing stuff. I don't know, I just prefer to have a decent HD monitor. It should, not saying 4K for God's sake, but at least HD is a requirement, and a good size.
Yep.
Yeah.
You've also got to think with screens about the lag time.
Yeah, that's a good
Every
point.
screen manufacturer will have a delay in milliseconds, and that delay is the time it takes for you to physically move your mouse or your finger on the trackpad and for the screen to react. And anything above 5 milliseconds, it's noticeable, and it is horrible to work
totally. I've
with.
had that before. 100%.
I've got an Iyama ProLite 27-inch 4K, and it's got a 4 millisecond delay, and I just can't really tell.
Yours is nice,
it's
man.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
There's a few things to bear in mind with screens, actually. I'm glad you've mentioned that.
And acoustics as well. That's a big thing, because the screen can impact your acoustics as well. That's why I want to have mine behind my desk, because the way my screen is, it slightly sits in front of the two mini small 3.5-inch speakers. I would rather have the monitor behind.
That is rule number one with speakers. Have them behind the end baffles of your speakers. I just can't
with its desk. It's really annoying.
Yeah, I know. I'm limited as well, because mine's up against the wall, but mine are about 2 or 3 inches behind the end of my speaker baffles. Curved screens are a big no-no, because they act as radar dishes, and you get all sorts of weird acoustics coming off that. And ideally, you want them as low as you can. So if you look at like Atmos setups, and a lot of pro studios, the screens are actually in the desk.
Yep.
Now, you're going to get reflections anywhere, but if you move your screen, if you play with the angle of it, move it back and forth, and have a listen to the phantom center of your speakers, it'll drive you nuts. It's a whole nother rabbit hole to go down. But rule of thumb, as far as I'm aware, is as far back as you can, don't get a curved screen, and as low as you can, ideally at some kind of angle that isn't straight at you. DistroKid hosts a range of visually engaging social media promotion tools to help your release stand out from the crowd. Creative and colourful social media cards incorporate your artwork to help your release stand out. These are free to download and can be highly effective promoting your release. DistroKid also offer mini videos, which are free, short, customizable videos incorporating your artwork and a short clip of your track. And if this wasn't enough, DistroKid also have a tool to create a Spotify canvas generator, which is the video that plays in the background when you're playing a song on Spotify. Simply choose a theme and choose from dozens of different creative artwork concepts. These are free to use and great for engaging your audience, available on DistroKid. For an additional subscription of $8.25 a month, you can get your music videos distributed to Apple Music, Vivo, and Tidal, and you'll keep 100% of your royalties. With DistroVid from DistroKid. Now, boring one, but rather essential, and this has me paranoid all the time. Locks and alarms.
Big time, yep.
Probably goes without saying. Now, on Google, for my business profile for the studio, is actually registered my home address. I'm not sure I should have advertised that. However, if you want to come around and say hello, that's where I live. But I purposefully chose that over the studio address because I like having the anonymity of where my studio is. Also, if there is a problem, my studio's at the end of someone else's garden and there's a family, so I don't want to bring them any grief. Should, the worst case arise or someone decides to rob me, they can come and rob me with my neighbours and housemate rather than the studio. But yeah, we've got a couple of pretty hefty locks and the security cameras and stuff like that here. And everything is insured, which is my next bullet point. Insurance. Insurance is one of those things that is frustrating. Don't even get me started on car insurance. That's the biggest legal con in the country. You have to have it, but they can basically charge what they want at the moment, which is disgusting. Anyway, moving on quickly. Insurance is useful, and I know this personally because I had a van stolen in 2018, which had about 10 grand's worth of my live sound equipment in the back. And my insurance, which was through Victor Knight, and it was underwritten by Allianz, they were amazing. I don't recommend Victor Knight as a company, but Allianz, who underwrite them, they were phenomenal. So I feel confident that if the studio got robbed, I've sent them photos of the studio, the entry, the door, the locks, the cameras. They said, yep, cool, we can insure that for whatever X amount I insured everything for. And I have no doubt that if there was a problem, they would they would pay out. So they're my recommendation for that. And then public liability is another one. If you're having people in the studio, there's a bit of a legality on this where a guy I used to work with had a home studio, and one of his neighbours who he fell out with reported him for having a commercial premises because he had a home studio. He was having friends in and out, and he got investigated by the council, and he just had to prove that it was a commercial studio and it was his mates coming round. Sorry, it wasn't a commercial studio. It was a private studio and it was his mates coming round. That had the potential to get sticky. Now, he could prove that it wasn't his main income. If it is your main income and you're having clients in and out, legally, technically, you are supposed to register with your council as a commercial premises. This will affect and increase your insurance, and you will then have to start paying business rates rather than commercial rates. It's a fiddly one. I've not had to deal with it, thankfully. The chances of you getting caught by any of this is, and this is definitely not advice or legal advice or business advice. Pay due diligence. Fucking hell.
Yes, we've got a fucking word you can't say. Prick.
This will be an outtake. Pay due diligence and do your own research. But there are caveats to having a commercial premises. And if it's something you do full time, you will need to be aware of it. Because if you get caught out, the fines are probably going to close your business down.
Yep.
That's the end of my list. I mean, I think we've ended on a particular hard note there. Have you got more to add to that?
I'd probably add on to your point. So obviously, I've got a rented studio. So obviously I'm covered because obviously I pay rent to my landlord, and this is obviously a registered building. But with this being obviously a registered building for, commercial.
But yours is already a commercial
premises.
Yeah.
When you're running a studio, you've got to think about electricity. Again, I've got a meter that gets sent to my landlord. It's like a smart meter. And then it's like we just got a direct debit. She sends me a direct debit that they've charged for that month. That last month it was 35 quid, which I was quite happy with. But again, those are all things you got to think about. You got to think about, like, it's not just like, buy the speakers and buy this and that and buy all the good stuff. Like, you've got to pay your rent. You've got to pay your electricity. Again, if anything goes wrong, again, depending on the deal you've got with your landlord, again, you're going to have to pay for certain things. But again, I had to pay to get toilet, like all plasterboarded and stuff, because it was...
I know, and it really pained you. Why should I get a fucking toilet done?
Fucking raging. I still need to paint it.
Because you might have girls round and they pay attention. It's one of those things that, like I said in the previous episode, I judge an establishment on the toilets, and if they haven't paid attention to it, they're not paying attention to other areas of their business.
True. So,
sadly, for some people like me who think anally retentively about that stuff, it does influence people's decisions.
And especially, and you know what, tax is another thing. I still remember, like, the first 2 years I did my tax, I was like, because I'd paid so much, I didn't actually owe anything. I'm like, this is easy. But obviously, as soon as I get to the point where I'm like earning a lot of income from this, and I don't have any expenditures to go out, I've not got any more things to buy, then you're going to get hit with a corporate tax bill at the end of the year. I pay for an accountant. I don't do it myself because
so do I.
It gives me the fear. Like my wife, she's a sole trader, as a childminder, so it was a bit easier for her. But as it's like corporation tax, I was like, nah. And then when we got into it, like, it was a bollock for my accountant. And I remember she phoned me, she's like, Paul, see your spreadsheet, you need to be even more detailed than that. I need to know where that's going, I need to know that. Where's that going? Well, I paid that with my credit card, and she was like, see you next year. You need to know your shit.
Spreadsheet is a good one.
Yeah, you need to know your shit.
In terms of everything. I mean, what we're doing now is getting into the realm of the Six Figure Home Studio podcast.
Yeah, very true.
Check out the episode we had with Chris Graham. Fascinating gentleman. He was a co-host with Brian Hood of the Six Figure Home Studio podcast, who we've mentioned, and I can't rave enough about it.
In terms of the security stuff, I'll just say very quickly, I had to buy an alarm for mine. So I've got PIRs, and it's a good system. And that's something that's very, very important. Even a Ring doorbell. I did pay for a Ring doorbell, but I have to set it, the motion thing detection, to be a little bit low, because when I first had it, oh my God, I was getting a ping for like the slightest thing. Anybody walked past it, I was like, ping, you have motion. And it gets quite addictive first, because you start people watching. You're like, what's going on here? And then it gets boring, and you get annoyed.
It's funny when you walk past someone's house and they're like, you are being filmed. And I'm like, I'm on the other side of the street, mate. What's going on here?
But that is important, because at the end of the day, right, if I'm telling you that this is 30 grand's worth of fucking gear in here, like, it would be absolutely stupid to not consider alarms, to not consider. I put a new door in because I was just not happy with what we had.
No, that was a smart
Yeah,
move.
so again, I managed to agree a deal with my landlord. So I put a brand new door in. So in my studio, you've got one door, two door, then your alarm. There's a back door that's like Fort Knox to get in. I've got PIRs like around the studio, so even if somebody breaks in via a window, it's going to go off. Those are the things, the unsexy things, the things that cripple you when you're starting out your studio and you're like, oh yeah, I've got like $6,000 worth of budget. Where you think it's like, yeah, I'm going to spend it all on audio gear. Your studio goes, yeah, I'm going to need about $4,000 worth of that, really?
Yeah, and before you know it, your budget's gone up 50% on all this.
So it is important
stuff.
to speak about, and I'm glad as much as it is, it is difficult, to speak about as such sexy things, because obviously, people are married. You know what I mean? We don't want
one more thing we've not mentioned as well, which is this is a can of worms. Hesitant to even open.
Dear.
Accessibility.
Yeah, that's another thing. I had to put
because you can't get away with it without having it these days. I mean, I've got a step outside my studio, but technically mine's not a commercial premises. So
I've got a back. I've got two entrances. I've got a side door that can take disabled access. Oh, Jesus Christ. Come on. I know this is a sexy podcast, Ed, but that's just filthy. Jesus. Right. So, especially when we're talking about disabled people, Ed. Jesus. Think
Sorry, ladies
children.
and gentlemen.
Right.
Theys and thems. Other languages available.
So I've got disabled access, and it's all on the flat so people can get in. But on my main entrance, there was just like a wooden step that was made.
Yeah, I remember.
But it was like all wobbly and stuff. And I was like, no, this is giving me the fear. So I got them to put a concrete shutter in. It looks terrible, but it's fixed in place. And when you come out the main entrance of the studio, your feet go straight on the step.
Like all good steps.
Nothing better than a good step that
fulfilling
that
their
functions
one
as a
brief.
step.
Brilliant. On that ginger bombshell, so we thought this would be a half an hour episode, and I think we've been going for about an hour.
And guarantee the stuff that we've missed as well, but fill it in the comments, fill the blanks, because we're done. We're done being sexy for a whole episode.
Thank you to DistroKid and Baby Audio for sponsoring the podcast. Remember, get 15% off your Baby Audio purchase using code WHAT15 at checkout. And there's also 30% off code for DistroKid as well. Both will be linked in the description and at the podcast show notes. Thank you, Paul. It's been emotional. I'm getting a little bit hungry. I don't know about you.
Yeah, we're done. We're done now. I'm just going to press the stop button there. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye. It's goodbye from me, and it's goodbye from that prick.